In the meantime, the government also not having a good day today. The 2G auction seems to have fallen flat. The first round of auction found no bidders for mega circles including Delhi and Mumbai. The government that had hoped to raise a revenue of about 40,000 crore rupees may end up with only about half that amount. 5 operators, Bharti, Airtel, Vodafone, Idea Cellular, Telenor and Videocon are bidding for GSM airwaves. New players and telecom companies affected by the verdict would have to wait for at least 4 blocks to start or continuing with their operations. Existing players whose licenses were not affected by the Supreme Court order can bid only for 2 blocks. This applies for Airtel, Vodafone and partially to Idea Cellular. All right, Mayur is getting us the very latest on this story, and Dheeraj Raya, Deputy Editor of Mail Today, also joins us. Mayur, just take us through exactly. Our conversation in the morning pointed out towards this very fact that the government might be overstretching itself, being too optimistic in this. Why is it that telecom companies are not interested right now in shelling out those big bucks?
Akash, the general mood in the telecom sector is very gloomy, and despite all that gloom, the response that the government had expected was better than the response that it actually got. The response that the government had actually got, you can see, Delhi and Mumbai being the most, in-demand circles. These 2 circles not having a single bidder. The other 2 circles, of course, Karnataka and Rajasthan are the other 2 circles which does not have a single bidder. Delhi and Mumbai not having a single bidder speaks volumes about the gloom that is surrounding the telecom sector today. Of the 21 circles that have been put for blocks, only 1 circle, that is UP East, is the circle where there will actually be an auction. Because Akash, that's the only circle where there are more bidders. That's the number of slots that are available.
Yes.
In all other circles, 4 circles, no bidder, 1 circle, there are more bidders. In all other 16 circles, there are lesser bidders than the number of slots. So there will be many slots that will go, that will not even be taken in the other remaining 16 circles. So net, there will be a revenue generation of not more than 20,000 crore with all these efforts. The larger question being asked now is that with Mr. Raja, despite all that allegations of corruption, etc., in 2008, the government was able to generate about 15,000 crore rupees to the exchequer through the allocation of those licenses. So 4 years later, just an additional 5,000 crore, a lot of gloom surrounding the sector. So
all right, Mayur, thanks for getting us that update. Dheeraj, just take me. You've been looking at this, and we've been looking at the situation, how it has developed, this whole telecom sector from boom to bust. Are we looking at a completely different sector at this point of time that is just struggling to stay afloat, leave alone expand?
Yes, absolutely. I think it was sunrise sector through much of the 2000s, and the 2G scam has really killed it in many ways. And in this auction, I think the government did a bit of an overkill. Mr. Raja was accused of setting the reserve price too low. I think what they've gone and done is an overcorrection. They've put the reserve price 7 times as high. And the purpose of an auction isn't necessarily always to maximize revenue for the government or put on the defensive by the 2G scam. That's what the government is saying. I mean, the purpose of an auction is to discover the correct price. Then if you put the reserve price too high, maybe you're not discovering the correct price. This is a price too high for most telecom companies which are in serious debt. And their revenue margins are very small. It's just too high for them to pay.
From what you're telling me is, again, the government, it's a massive faux pas. On one hand, Raja's, the whole allegation was he set it too low. He said that this is for public consumption, tele-density to be increased. And now the government has gone ahead and done something which is completely on the reverse. Is the government too scared right now? It is running scared. It doesn't want any more headache. Put the reserve price high. We don't care as long as we are not dragged into court or called corrupt.
Yes, I think with the reserve price of 14,000 crores, nobody can accuse them of not trying to maximize the revenue. So it's definitely an over-defensive strategy, very, very cautious. Mr. Raja's problem was not so much that he set the reserve price low, but the problem was in the non-transparent mechanism through which he gave away the licenses. So I think they've got that mistaken. There's a problem with non-transparency, and then there's another problem of reserve price. They're correcting the reserve price problem to cover up the transparency failure, but I think if they'd just done the transparency bit, the reserve price may not have been such an issue. It could have been maybe 5,000, 6,000, 7,000.
What next for the sector? And where does the government now get the money from? If it's not getting it from here, and we know the government has to have those social spending schemes come next year because it has to prepare itself for the elections, where is the money going to come from?
It looks extremely difficult for the government. Mr. Chidambaram said even meeting the 5.1% target of fiscal deficit was going to be difficult. If he doesn't get his 40,000 crores here, it's going to be almost impossible. They can try disinvestment. I'm sure they will. but markets are choppy with political uncertainty. They may not get such a big dividend from that. The only other option is to further deregulate diesel prices, but as you know, that's going to be extremely difficult again coming up towards an election. So I think some of the populist programs which they may want to unleash in the next budget in the run-up to elections, they'll have to take a rain check on those.
And does this whole auction of 2G spectrum mark a clear shift? Now the government dare not anger the courts, anger the people by giving away natural resources for free or for very low cost. Is this a significant shift? This is the future. This is how it's going to happen. We don't care even if it is overpriced.
Yes, that's possibly the government's argument, except you don't want them going unutilized. You don't want spectrum to lie idle because nobody wants to buy it because it's too expensive. So, I mean, there's a trade-off between it being used effectively and it being priced too expensively. And let me just say that the reality of the telecom sector is now that tariffs for consumers are going to go up one way or the other. The debts are too high, revenues are too low. Eventually, I suspect somebody's going to pick this up for 14,000 crores. So the consumer is going to pay at the end.
Okay, so that's, I think, the news point that we need to transmit to our viewers also. Dheeraj Bhai, thanks for joining us here on Headlines Today. But very clearly at this point of time, expect, and that's the takeaway for you and me, we don't want to worry you about 14,000 or 20,000 crore rupees, but your monthly bill will go high because there's too much of debt in those balance sheets of those telecom companies.